Yo, what is up, guys? Will here with Canyon, and we've got a special video for you today. We're going over some players that you can get off your roster, get rid of the roster cloggers. It's a really important thing in fantasy basketball, specifically compared to other fantasy sports. There's guys that you can kind of hold onto your roster, but in fantasy, playing the waiver wire is so important, right? You want to maximize the number of games you can play a lot of times in both category and points. It's really important for you to have the versatility to be able to pick up guys off the waiver wire, drop the worst player on your team. So right here, we're going to go over some guys that you can just get off your roster, clean house a little bit. We'll go through these guys one by one and read them off, but just kind of in a general rule, because we're only able to cover so many players. Look at your roster and determine your worst player that you're able to drop. A lot of times it's guys who are, maybe they're veterans, maybe they're guys that are locked into a role, and there is an upside for them to be greater than what they're doing currently, and their production can be matched by 15, 20 guys in the waiver wire, so there's no point in you holding onto those guys on your rosters. Real quick before we get into it, if you guys could like the video and subscribe to the channel, would really appreciate it. We're trying to win you guys some titles. Would appreciate the love there. But let's get right into it. Ken, you want to get the first drop candidate?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first one here, it's going to be a pretty common name for this kind of video and category. It's Bruce Brown for the Denver Nuggets. As the Nuggets have become more healthy with guys like Jamal Murray, KCP, Bones Highland all playing their normal minutes and being more efficient for the team, he's been returning to kind of mid 20-minute games, seeing less offensive usage. And of course, like, Bruce Brown's a very talented addition to this team. He's been a very solid player for them, but he's just not going to be consistent when all the other guards are healthy on this team. He was playing like mid 30 minutes earlier in December, I think it was, but this past month it's been dropped down a lot to like high 20s, back to like, maybe mid to high 20s. And he's just, it's like 15 points is kind of what you're looking for out of him. Decent peripherals, like 4 and 4 maybe, but nothing crazy. He just doesn't have the volume to have those super high week winning upside games as these waiver wire guys, sometimes like you're looking for out of them. And in categories, right, it's nothing crazy in any certain category either. Like, sure, he's got maybe a couple 3-pointers out of him and good points, some rebounds, some assists, some defensive stats, but nothing really like week winning where this is a guy that you want to grab off the waivers or keep on your team and hold other people off to win your week. I think with everybody healthy on this Nuggets team and his minutes decreasing, his usage decreasing, I think he's definitely a drop candidate now, with his floor being lowered and his ceiling being lowered for sure.
Definitely. And next up here, another guy I kind of described a little bit earlier in the video. We talk about these veteran guys who are kind of locked into the roles, not a ton of upside. It's Eric Gordon. And honestly, it's kind of interesting because I do think a lot of people want to hold on and roster these guys who randomly will give you a decent game and play consistent minutes. I mean, guys that are playing like 29, 30 minutes, I totally get in most leagues people wanting to hold on to those guys. But really, I mean, efficiency isn't great. He's going to be a 12 plus, 12 to 15 point guy. Doesn't really give you a ton of upside in the peripheral department. So Eric Gordon's one of those guys where there's just not a lot of upside. He's going to give you these random decent games, but really you can replicate what he is typically going to give you night in and night on the waiver wire in most leagues. So there really isn't a point in, holding on to this guy. I'm sure he's the worst player on a lot of teams, especially as people in, 10, 12 team leagues. And, real quick before we get into the next one, I do want to mention, we don't know exactly what your leagues look like, right? Your leagues better than ours. So we might list off some people and you're thinking, what are you talking about? Like, I'm in a 24 team league. Like, everyone's so valuable. Of course, don't just auto drop these people if there really is no better replacement. But really the versatility that you get from the waiver wire is a lot better than holding on to Eric Gordon.
Yeah, I think we have a little bit of variety coming up in this list too. So whether you're in like a 10, 12, 14, 16 team league, I think you can find something out of this. But next up here, we've got Santi Aldama for the Grizzlies. Again, this is a guy that should not probably be on your roster still. Unless you're in like a deep league, you could probably have him on there. But at least in Yahoo leagues, he's 21% rostered still, which is kind of crazy to me. I don't think you should have this guy on your roster. His minutes are down to 15 to 20 minutes per game. Now that they're healthy, Jaren Jackson being back and all that. He's a good player, but he won't give you the stats consistently, or he'll rarely give you a week winning performance in like a 3 to 4 game stint if you're trying to pick him up. He was very good right out of the start with no Jaren Jackson, Brandon Clark playing less minutes and being hurt as well. So like he had his opportunity there, but with them being fully healthy, the minutes are down, right, to 15 to 20 minutes a game, and his stats are very much down as well. So he's very much a minutes dependent guy, a volume dependent guy, and so like sure he can have a couple games here or there if someone gets hurt, but assuming that everybody stays healthy, which we should probably do for the most part in fantasy basketball, I don't think he's worth rostering in most leagues.
Next up here, I've got Grant Williams, another guy who gets decent minutes, but it can be a little sporadic and inconsistent. Definitely a role player guy, really bad in category leagues. He's not really great at any one category. You look at things like his 3-point percentage is pretty good, but man, just overall, his volume is just never going to be there. Too many good scorers on the Boston team. And, even in these games that he plays decent minutes, I mean, he can be the lowest volume guy across all starters and rotational guys as well. Just really not a ton of upside. And he's rostered in like 25% of Yahoo leagues. He's just one of those guys where, like I mentioned earlier, you look at him and you just think, where's the upside? And you look at the production he'll give you game in and game out. And like I mentioned before, if you can replicate that on the waiver wire, that's the theme of the video. If you can replicate the production or close to what these guys at the bottom of your roster are giving you, why are you holding on to those guys? You're just wasting a roster spot, wasting the ability to add extra games to your week, which is really important in fantasy basketball.
Yeah, next up here we've got Jackson Hayes for the Pelicans. This guy is kind of under the radar, maybe a deeper league kind of person to talk about, but he was injured and he came back and he had a pretty good game back from his injury, but again, he probably isn't the most heavily rostered anyway. But like with Zion back, and if Bi comes back, and Valanciunas starting, like there's too many guys on this Pelicans team. They've been clicking so well. They've been winning a lot that I don't think Jackson Hayes is all of a sudden going to come in and play 30 to 40 minutes a game and get you the volume and production that you need out of him. We saw him come back from injury, had one good game, but since then, the minutes haven't been crazy. The efficiency hasn't been crazy. So I don't want people to get on the hype train about Jackson Hayes coming back and think that he's automatic an ad, depending on if anything happens to Valanciunas, of course, because their center depth is a little different. But even with Bi or Zion being out, I still don't even think that he's worth an ad. So let alone if this whole team is healthy, you should keep Jackson Hayes on the waiver wire. He gives obviously good upside in points, rebounds, and defensive stats, but he really needs minutes to kind of thrive in that, right? A lot of these bigs that thrive in those categories need minutes, and right now he's just not getting it. He's kind of pushing maybe 20 minutes a game, which just isn't enough for an ad, especially in 10, 12 team leagues.
Yeah, definitely. Next up here, it hurts my heart to say this, but we've got Poku on here. Definitely an interesting guy early in the season. This OKC team, especially when Chat went down with the injury, there was a lot of questions as to, outside of Shea and Josh Giddey and these, Dort, these guys we know are going to have usage, where's it going to go, right? A lot of rookies, a lot of young guys, and it seemed like there was an open spot for Poku to provide some fantasy value, and he did, definitely in spurts and in some games, but, obviously currently injured. And so he is an IL eligible guy. So, we talk about a lot of times, if you have an IL spot, throw the guys that get injured on there. But even an IL spot, depending on how your league is set up, can get clogged as well, right? A lot of times we have players, like Zion or Bradley Beal who, get these hamstring injuries, and they're studs on your team who are going to be out for, a certain amount of time, and you're able to throw them on the IL. And then you have flexibility outside of that to add players on the waiver wire and fill in those spots. So Poke is one of those guys who we really think is not worth the IL spots. Even when he is healthy, he's really close to the fringe waiver wire guy. I'm sure a lot of you guys who picked up Poku had games you're really happy, these good block games, good scoring, and then he disappears and, plays half the minutes he played the previous game. And I think that's even more likely, especially with the way a lot of the young OKC rookies are playing right now, could really see Poku's minutes be even more sporadic when he comes back. So he's another one of those guys who can give you these good games, but everyone on the waiver wire can give you these good games that have, even more clear roles than Poku. So I think he's one of those guys where if he is clogging up your IL, just let him go. He's not worth holding on to. There's other guys who offer similar upside and maybe even more consistency in most leagues.
Yeah, his consistency has been, suspect even when healthy, right? So definitely a good shout there. But last up here, another guy that can be an IL spot guy is Lonnie Walker. He's currently hurt. I know he had a pretty good start to the season, pretty shocking, addition to the Lakers team and fantasy impact for the Lakers this year. But Lonnie Walker, even when he's healthy, he gives decent points and 3-pointers, but his peripherals have pretty little upside. And with the Lakers getting more healthy, with guys like Dennis Schroeder coming in and maybe possibly, them adding more assets in the future trade window, what have you, he may dissipate a little bit in his fantasy production. So this is another guy that, he was probably on the fringe already when he was healthy, but him getting hurt, I don't think he's worth an IL spot to hold there and kind of, push your luck with and think he's going to come back and be better or even the same. I don't think he's worth it, especially in a category league. It's just you can replace him so easily as far as points and threes goes. But yeah, Lonnie Walker, fantasy points category, I don't think it really matters. I don't think he's a highly coveted waiver wire ad. Like I said, it's just points and threes on a good night. Peripherals are very few and far between, as well as defensive stats, and Lakers can just get more healthy, add more assets, which just really hurt Lonnie Walker in the long run. So I think Lonnie Walker is definitely a guy you can just drop.
Yeah, definitely. And just to reiterate some things, really, I think this concept is super important. Talked about at the beginning of the video. Being able to have the flexibility and versatility to drop some of these guys is really important. And even if you look at players, maybe you're looking at fantasy points per game and you look at Eric Gordon versus, the top 5 guys in the waiver wire, and Gordon's got them edged out slightly. The flexibility is way worth the 1.2 points per game but better that Gordon is giving you versus some of these other guys who probably have more upside anyways, and also have the flexibility for you to be able to drop those players. I think a lot of times people look at their fantasy NBA matchups for the week and they go, oh man, this guy's got, 6 or 7 more games this week than I do. Guess I lose. No. You don't lose because of that. You lose because you're holding on to Grant Williams through the week because you think he offers more upside long-term than guys in the waiver wire. Stop doing that. Make sure you're dropping the worst players on your team to pick up waivers, fill in your game slots, and win your fantasy matchups. Thank you guys for watching the video. We'll see you in the next one.